August 14, 2016. It's a typical summer Sunday in Baltimore, Maryland. It's hot, it's humid, and the city's quiet. As soon as I get my eyes open, I've got a big problem. I don't know where I am, and I don't know how long I've been here. I have one clue, and it's a guy standing in front of me in a white coat. So I'm thinking that I'm either in an insane asylum or a hospital, which is another problem because they're both highly probable. I didn't know it, but I had just emerged from a week-long coma. I also didn't know that I had emerged from myself, the person I'd become. I'm Jim Spina. I'm the author of a best-selling book, I Almost Murdered a Complete Stranger. I'm a nuclear physicist. I have a graduate degree from Johns Hopkins University at the Applied Physics Laboratory. I've had fun jobs. I've had top secret security clearances. I served on board a nuclear submarine during the height of the Cold War. I served as a top executive for a Fortune 500 nuclear energy company. I enjoy physics, but I love smashing uranium atoms apart just to witness the absurd amounts of energy that's released when you smash one little atom apart. See, that's the fun part. That's the mysterious part. You see, what happens is a very, very minuscule amount of that atom disappears when it breaks apart. The two pieces it forms don't weigh as much as the original. And that's the mystery. And that's where all the energy comes from. We can tell you what happens precisely, but physicists can't tell you how it happens. How matter transforms itself into pure energy, we have no idea. But that does not mean that it's not real, and it does not mean that it doesn't have an absurd, enormous amount of power. Some of what I'm going to tell you now was told to me by my oldest daughter. I wasn't there. My daughter came in and found me lying on my kitchen floor, lying in a pool of dark blood. She was on the phone at the time with her mom, who was in Florida. She ended their conversation. "Mom, Dad's lying in a pool of blood. I've got to hang up. He's not dead." I carry a lot of regret for the fact that my daughter found me in a pool of my own blood. But the fact is that blood is a big part of my story. Blood's another mystery. We don't understand it. Scientists can't tell you what it's all about, but it holds tremendous energy. Our life is in the blood. When you lose a lot of blood, a ghastly amount of blood like I did, some really bad things happen. When I arrived at the hospital, I was hypothermic. My body had started freezing to death. I was critically dehydrated. I was given almost a gallon of body fluids, not counting the blood, about 9 pounds worth. I was in lethal respiratory trauma. I was gasping oxygen, but because there was no blood, it wasn't available. And my heart was undergoing a nuclear meltdown. My pulse was skyrocketing, going past 170. It was trying to do what some of you have probably heard in the workplace, do more with less. But the good news is they stabilized me. And then I had another hemorrhage, worse than the first one. My daughter got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from a doctor who said, "Your father's had another bleed. We need your permission to immediately transport him by a medevac helicopter to Maryland University Shock Trauma Center. We cannot save his life here." She paused, and he said, "He'll die if we don't do this now." What would your daughter do if she got a phone call like that, or your son? Yeah, mine too. I was airdropped off at the helipad at the Shock Trauma Center, unknowingly, and I'm surprised I wasn't gift wrapped in a body bag with a thank you note on it from the first hospital. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and answer a question that some of you might have. Is anybody wondering how in the hell I lost all that much blood? I mean, was there a home invasion? Had a lunatic invaded my house and stabbed me in some insane attack? No, remember my ex-wife was in Florida. The truth of the matter is, I've been bleeding to death for over a decade. Remember I told you I'm a nuclear physicist, I split atoms, I got top secret security clearances, I trailed Soviet submarines around. Yeah, that's a good part of my story. I like to tell that part first. But there's another side to my story. For 42 years, I led a secret double life. And I held a secret that I would fight for and I would keep until I died. And I, in fact, did. Almost. I was an alcoholic. Now, if any of you have ever been in AA or in an addiction treatment center, you'll know that what I said to you just now is blasphemy. Because dogma dictates that alcoholics cannot recover from alcoholism. The words are, I am an alcoholic. I am an addict. I stand by my use of the word was. I had been diagnosed as having entered the terminal stage of alcoholism. I had advanced alcoholic liver cirrhosis and was an end-stage liver disease. I'd been bleeding for a long time. But I'm a clever man. So I always carried with me a gallon-sized Ziploc baggie. One day, in fact, I excused myself from a board meeting as an executive of that company, quickly found myself a stall that I could lock myself into in the bathroom. Being a nuclear submarine officer, formed a pressure shield between my mouth and this baggie and proceeded to vomit a gallon of bright red blood into it. For 10 years. But when I was lying on that floor in a cold pool of dark blood, that's when the miracle happened. That's when the miracle started in my life. I could not break free from the grip of alcoholism. Somehow, my psyche had become entangled with a power greater than me. And it was strangling me to death. I call it the stranger. I say a miracle happened, and it did. Absurd healings occurred. Physical, mental, and spiritual transformations happened. But let me frame this for you so that you have the right perspective on this. I was being kept alive. I was in a coma. I was being tube-fed, and I was on a mechanical ventilator. I don't know about you. That's my worst-case medical scenario. I got well ridiculously, absurdly quickly. I walked out of that hospital on my own power unaided 4 days later. I have witnesses that bore this. Was physically healed. A page of pre-existing medical conditions disappeared. Many MRIs, normal blood tests since then. And a host of stoic doctors bear witness to me. I even haven't told you the good part yet. My alcoholism was lifted from me. I would not have wanted to live had that not happened. That sounds ungrateful, but who wants to be healed to a life of bleeding to death? 42 years, a 42-year obsession and compulsion to drink alcohol. And every compulsion, craving, obsession to drink vanished. It vanished. One doctor I spoke with said I had a spontaneous, extraordinary event, a C. Thank God, like a lightning bolt, I was struck sober. I was struck sober. I knew I'd been spared for a reason. I knew that there was a reason that I wasn't dead. And that was to help people suffering from the affliction of alcoholism and addiction. People that are suffering from the affliction itself and those in the family. Now, I don't know how many people are in this room. Actually, I'm a physicist, I counted. So the odds are that none of you are alcoholics are very, very improbable. 10% of the population, no, this is rhetorical. There's no raising of hands. It's a rhetorical, 10%. You'd have to have had genetic testing done for that not to be possible. Statistical, highly improbable. You know what's even more improbable? The fact that none of you have a family member, and I'm talking immediate nuclear family. Father, mother, child, sibling, spouse, or significant other that doesn't have the disease. 70% of the people in this country are in that category. You'd be really a statistical anomaly if that were the case. I left that hospital with a thirst for knowledge, so I learned as much as I possibly could about alcoholism, about science, about healing, about transformation, about spirituality, about recovery, as I possibly could, and I anchored myself because I talked with hundreds of people. Alcoholics in different phases of their lives, addicts in different phases of their lives, and those affected by alcoholism, and those who treat it. Doctors, nurses, counselors, employers. I am no expert on just about anything, but so what I'm going to tell you is I speak for myself, and I offer only my opinion. But I feel that I've earned my seat at the table of opinions about drunkards. And here's what I can see now. It's funny because when you look at everything, there's an interesting fact. Primitive people, people not as scientifically advanced as us, had a different perception of alcoholism than we do now. The word alcohol comes from an ancient Arabic word, al-kul. It means body-eating spirit. The Romans had a different word for alcohol. It comes from their word for spirit. That's why when you go to the liquor store and look on a bottle of alcohol, it says spirits on it. Those aren't and weren't medically advanced people, though. Today, we've given alcoholism and its treatment over to the domains of physical and social sciences. There's nothing wrong with science. But I have found that scientific dogma severely limits our perspective on illness, on healing, and recovery. Severely. What's dogma? You know, dogma in my mind, that's that cul-de-sac where unorthodox, contrary, even absurd ideas go to get slowly strangled to death. That's what dogma is. And it's killing people. Dogma is bias, and bias causes stigma, and stigma kills. This approach to alcoholism, to ignore the spiritual aspect, is to ignore our soul. And it leaves people feeling void and isolated. And I can tell you the last thing an alcoholic needs to do is to feel more empty and shunned than he already does. Because they're already weak-willed, suffering from an incurable disease, unreliable, untrustworthy liars. How about let's make them feel a little more that way? Stigma kills. The social sciences, the physical sciences, I'm a physicist. They practice stigma. It is novo cool in the sciences to disclude anything spiritual. Atheism is in, spirituality is out, if you're a scientist. There is a medical term for what happened to me. It's not spontaneous extraordinary recovery or event. It's called spontaneous remission. Remission because it doesn't say cure, and spontaneous because it happened instantly. Look up spontaneous remission in the American Medical Association. You know what it says? An inexplicable medical phenomena. It doesn't say a damn thing. That's what they're allowed to say, though, because they cannot say a miracle happened, a supernatural happened, something I don't understand happened. There are a lot of studies to suggest that the three hardest words for an adult to say, and I will tell you, particularly an adult scientist, to say are, I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you without reservation, I don't know. How what happened, happened. But I know that it did. I haven't bled. I have normal blood tests. I don't have cirrhosis. How'd that happen? Let me tell you what I see for what it's worth, from where I stand. Alcoholism's alive. The basis for all addiction is spiritual. Alcoholism has one objective, and that's to kill the alcoholic. It'll get them alone first if it can. And its success rate in doing this is astounding. Recovery, the only recovery that can occur for the alcoholic is through a spiritual experience. There is no other way to conquer alcoholism or addiction. That's what I see from where I sit. You know, scientists have been studying this for a long time, social scientists. We've relinquished it to the domains of science. There's nothing wrong with that. They've done great things about teaching us about the body and the mind. But here's the problem. Here's the only problem with scientists. They disavow anything supernatural or spiritual. Here's what I see. And they've been working on the wrong problem statement. Study what has been being studied for 28 years now. Why do alcoholics behave the way they do? I'd rather solve world hunger. Who can explain how any of us, why we behave the way we do? But there is a set, hundreds of sets of explanations for it by psychologists, by sociologists, by medical doctors, by practitioners, by neurobiologists, biologists, biochemists, chemists. Why we behave the way we do. Here's the problem statement. 6,000 people in this world die from alcoholism every single day. In the short time it's going to take me to give this speech, 70 graves are going to get dug. It doesn't stop, around the clock, every day, every single day. And that's a problem statement. That's a problem statement. Well, the first thing we can do, first thing I can do that I want to do, my heart bleeds for those suffering from alcoholism and addiction. I left that hospital with a deep empathy and compassion because one thing that wasn't wiped clean is my memory. I remember all the blood, all the pain, and all the suffering, and I remember a very long, painful death. I remember that. I'm here, my life was spared for a reason, and that's to help people affected by alcoholism. And the first thing we do is by sharing information. I'm pretty sure everybody in here didn't know that that many people die every day, every minute from this disease, or how many of them there are, or how to help them. So the next time there's a little curiosity on their part about something spiritual, or perhaps there's a solution, don't kill their hope. Hope's the only thing they got. The possibility is funny because as a scientist, I'm always amazed at how we will just accept anything science says. That's got to be true. That's true. The science has proven it's a scientific law. But talk about something spiritual, we reject it immediately. I'm going to give you two propositions. You tell me which one is more absurd. Here's a spiritual one. The known universe, this is true, has 2 trillion galaxies. Not planets, not galaxies. We're in one of them, the Milky Way, 2 trillion. That means there's more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on the earth. Now, here's my spiritual assertion. In that cosmos, it's possible there's a power greater than me. Absurd. Here's a scientific assertion. I'm a nuclear physicist. I understand quantum physics. Here's a dictate of quantum physics. It's an edict, it's a law, it's been proven time and time again. You would not have your cell phone and it would not work if it were not true. An object can be in 2 different places at the same time. Fact. Fact of quantum physics. Which of those is the more absurd proposition? Which one? The scientific one? Is it harder to believe that? Or the one about spirituality? Yeah. I'm going to end this discussion with a quote from Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He also had a spontaneous extraordinary event before they called it that over 70 years ago. He said, and I quote, "Alcoholics are trying to drink God out of a bottle. And if it were not true that there was a power greater than the reach of any science on this earth, I would not have the title almost in my book, I Almost Murdered a Complete Stranger, because I would be dead."